Hey everyone, I'm Paul Greenberg and welcome to Rated PG. And if you haven't figured out what PG is, it's me, right? It's not an actual movie rating. So here's the story. Um, Before I have some housekeeping or some, actually, I want to have a brief conversation with you before we get on to the actual content of the show. So I have this dilemma, and it's been a dilemma that's kind of been consistent. I have had absolutely amazing guests every single show. And I'm not saying that just to be nice to guests. The conversations have been interesting. The people are wonderful human beings. There's been content that's actually worth hearing about. So, for example, the last show we had three uh, authors effectively on, even though they were all coming from different places. And it was an astounding conversation about writing is what it ended up being. It wasn't really planned to be that way. We're more going to talk about their specific books, but but it ended up being a conversation about writing, and it was remarkable. And of course, I published a few too, so I actually jumped in. So I've had these great guests. I have some amazing guests who I'll talk to you about in just a minute. But I have this dilemma at the same time, and it's the same dilemma I had with Talking Headless when I first started the show, and I'm going to mention that in a minute. I started that show as a audio podcast. It ended up being a show now run by Shashi Belamkanda, who hosted by Shashi Belamkanda, which will actually air right after this show at noon Eastern time. And I'll tell you the guests in a second. But it evolved from an audio podcast to ultimately a show that was about analyst relations and analysts, right? And it's kept that format ever since. Shashi's been doing it for a year and he's done a hell of a good job. In fact, better than I ever could have done. But it took a long time to evolve. It was work in progress. And this show is too. And I've had great guests, but I'm not comfortable with my own format. Really, there's something bothering me about it. I'm not sure what it is. And I'm going to spend the next month or so before the next show, or if I have to, I'll take hiatus for 1 month and make it 2 months to rethink how I'm doing the show. And I'm going to be looking for suggestions. So watch on LinkedIn, on where, and so on, and other places where you can find me. And I'm going to ask you for suggestions. I'm going to be reaching out to individuals, including our current guests, about changes I might make in format. Again, the conversations are amazing. And so it's not really that, it's just me. Okay. This is a work in progress. It's meant to be a work in progress. Like, for example, one error I didn't even notice I was doing is you notice the logo in the upper right corner here. For whatever reason, for the first four episodes, I forgot to include that. Right. So, which is really comes with age, 76. What can I tell you? Um, And the other thing is I've been experimenting with my microphones, so there's also the technical side I've got to experiment with. I checked on the mic I actually have been using for the last couple of shows and listened to it by pre-recording something just to test it. And it sounds incredibly good, but at the same time, there's still a little too much ambient room noise in it. So I'm using the mic I normally use for like CRM players and some of our other shows. So anyway, that's the story. I just wanted to raise it now because, this is a brand new concept, a brand new show, and I want to kind of make it something special. But the guests are special, the format isn't. And I have to fix that. So now I want to tell you about today's guests. And it's a really interesting combination. I'm calling the show The Boomer and the Millennial, right? Because that's literally what it is. And in fact, um, the show it overall is about things that go on in the trenches. Really, it's about the day-to-day life of people, or under in one circumstance, the extraordinary life of a person when an emergency hits. And we're going to be looking at what they do to take care of what they've done throughout their lives in business and so on, but what they do to manage all of that with the rest of their life. Because look, I'm not one of these people who says there's some separation between personal and business life. It's just life. Okay. And life is life, and business is a part of it. The other things you do besides business, like, family and handle circumstances when they come up, and hobbies and culture and music and art, whatever, that's all part of life. Okay. So there's not balance of work life, it's balance, it's life and how you handle life. Okay. And this show is about how to handle life in two very different circumstances. So my guests today are going to be uh, these two. Um, Scott Rogers, who I have known as long as I have been in the world of CRM. Was actually my first, not just client, but my first friend, right, in the CRM world that I met through that. And he's been my friend ever since. And we're going to be talking about something he has been doing over the last several years that's fascinating. And on almost the opposite side of the spectrum, I've known Lela Koopal Patel for less than a year. But what she's also doing, both business wise and in her and how she's managing that with the rest of her life, is pretty astounding. And we'll go through that too. Now, as you know, the way the segments work on this show is we have Inside Out, which is somebody who is in the B2B world, who actually is doing other things, that are of interest. And then we have someone who's and in Scott's case, it's been in the B2B world, but in his case, what he's been doing has been outside the B2B world and is, I think, a great deal of interest to people. So I think what we're going to do today is, we're going to start with the Inside Out segment, and then we'll go to Outside In. So let me get over to the Inside Out studio, which, I love saying is a different studio, but as you probably guess, really isn't. And then we'll have Lela on the show with us for Inside Out. Here we go. Hey, Lela, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I mean, you probably heard that little thing I was talking about in the beginning. I'm still trying to figure this show out. The good news for me is I have guests like you on it, right? So that actually carries the show, because I'm just not 100% there yet in how I want to do the show exactly. So listen, I actually wanted to start this segment a little differently than normal, because I actually, look, you are doing something in the business world that I actually love, and I've loved the idea of it even before I met you or what you're doing. I've always been somebody who's believed there was a marketplace called partner relationship management for many years. Okay. And, it was kind of up and down, because other people would just see it as CRM. And then the companies that really were good at it, like Channelway back in the day, didn't really make the level of effort they needed to make to actually build the market. So it didn't go where it had to go. Now, what you've done, though, takes this a lot further. And I'm going to do something I normally do not do, which is we're going to show a little bit about your company. And I'd like you to talk about it. Give me a second to bring it up on screen.
Oh no, not my website.
It's all right. It's just it's effectively a slide on your
Okay.
website. All right. So can you talk a little bit about your, about Partnered, which of
Yeah,
course has the millennial spelling of it,
it
right?
absolutely does, because
Yeah.
selling isn't only about the AE.
Okay, I'm in.
So
So,
yeah, it starts with one simple premise, which is that most enterprise ecosystems aren't doing it well. They just have a big enough margin for error to not really be impacted by it. And I've watched a lot of these enterprise and more recently smaller ecosystems create the same pitfalls. I've been inside the house. I worked at Salesforce in the partner organization. I was a solution engineer where I was referring partners, and I've been on the partner side. And so I've watched the changes to the programs. And it's not just Salesforce. I've been in the SAP program, Adobe, ServiceNow. They all run pretty similarly, where you have this massive ecosystem. You have thousands, if not tens of thousands of partners, or hundreds of thousands in some cases. And support is really concentrated at the top, because the assumption is only the top 1 to 10% are actually going to contribute a meaningful amount to your ecosystem. I don't think that's true. I think if you're thinking of individual contributions, yes. But I'm a big believer that you can still find your next 60 million within your long tail partners. So we built Partner to do just that. All those teams that have been completely decimated, um, we built Partner to effectively uplift the folks that are still at the company supporting these partners and having to do more with less because they don't have team members anymore.
So one last business question related to it. So one of the things that makes me really intrigued by what you're doing, and what I actually genuinely like about it, is you're not just saying, "Hi, we've got an agentic AI for partners." You're saying AI is a tool that will help you figure X, but there's also a consulting component, which is actual human beings,
Yeah.
right? Can you talk about the thinking behind the model? Because that's, I think, critical for people to hear, because it's also, by the way, the differentiator that has a real shot at making this a big success too.
Yeah, so honestly, it's because the technology came from the consulting. So before I developed the technology, I was running consulting. I had left a system integrator and I realized that there were so many that needed help. And over time, I realized that they fall into essentially three buckets of where they need to be. Either they are ready to go, they just aren't communicating their value properly. They've done enough to be valuable and be ready to go, but they haven't shaped anything up properly and they need a focus. Or they don't have a go to market strategy at all and they just need to put one together and follow it for 6 months and then create some repeatability. So I took that, put it in the engine, and for that's the engine is the intuition layer that identifies the gaps and where they fall, and then the curriculum that I was teaching these folks goes into the other side. So I'm a big believer that I don't think that any technology can fully replace a human. I think anybody who's saying that it can is lying.
How about
Or
an idiot? That would be a good one.
yeah, they're overestimating what the technology can do drastically. And we are not so naive at Partner that we think Partner IQ can completely replace a team. It's meant to be managed by a person. So it's meant to help the people on your team more effectively identify who to give their attention to, have a path for the ones that aren't ready to go down and start to prepare for the attention. And if you want to bring us in to help manage the ones that maybe you just don't want your team to manage, we can do that as well, because ultimately technology and human intervention need to go hand in hand.
Well, one thing I can tell you is my brother, in fact, who just retired, literally had effectively the same path as you did, which was he started out with a consulting company, and ironically, given our next guest, it was in emergency response, first response and emergency management. And it eventually evolved to a company with a very powerful technology platform that promoted and supported intrastate or interstate cooperation in times of real emergency. But he never ever stopped the consulting piece of it. That never went
Yeah.
away. I mean, but he built the platform at the same time, and let's put it this way, he did quite well. He did well enough for himself to be moving to New York in about. Um, I mean, he lives around where I live, but moving to New York in less than a month
Wow.
on, and he bought an apartment on the Upper West Side. So
Wow.
clearly, he did
Yeah.
fine, right? So that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. So that model does work. So but
Um,
let's actually. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
oh yeah, just one thing. I think the people still want to talk to a human. I mean, when I call a customer service line and I get an agent, like an AI agent, I get very frustrated. I didn't ask for this when I asked for technological advancements. And I think the fact that partners are incentivized to use the technology in hopes that by improving their go to market and the way they communicate who they are and their value, they get in touch with the person, tells you that human interaction will never be replaced.
And again, I'm 1,000% agreement with you on that one. So let me throw out this though. So you worked for very large companies, and
Yes.
then now you're effectively now on your own.
Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, you've lived the rest of your life. You've had to live the rest of your life too. You were a kid and you grew up and you got
Yeah.
older and you have family, and you have friends and you had things that interested you that were not related to, you know, partnering. And other than maybe with a spouse, but how do you manage the change in the rest of your life? Because that look, one of the things that I see a lot, and I've had this, I because people tend to gravitate to me to try to help them. I also end up being a little bit of not necessarily a qualified one, but a little bit of a life coach, right? With people because they bring out their problems and we talk them through. And being an old guy, I try to use the examples of all the mistakes I made to help them not make those mistakes at least. And but what I find is that these problems in the rest of their life change, but they always exist. They're not always problems either. They're just changes in course.
Yeah.
They're different thinking. They're changes in things that interest them, and then and it's just a matter of managing time to some extent, or it's not just that, but it's a matter of managing time to some extent. Can you talk about what it's meant on for all the other things in your life beyond the business when you're making that transition out of Salesforce corporate
Yeah.
to yourself and a couple other people?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a challenge. So I started this a few years ago, and I've been traveling quite a bit for my job because I was leading alliances for a system integrator, which requires a lot of travel. Um, and so suddenly stopping that first and foremost was a really big challenge because I kind of had to sit with what's my day to day routine. And in the process of starting this business and then transitioning it from a consulting to a product and consulting company, as you know, I planned a wedding. So that was very challenging. And we had about 5 other weddings to go to the same year. So
How did you even do that, though? How did you? I
it
mean,
was,
what do you say to yourself because you're in the middle of this big transition in the
yeah,
business side and a even bigger transition, right on
yeah.
for the rest of your life?
I mean, I think first and foremost, you have to choose the right life partner that is willing to handle that. Because if I didn't have a supportive husband, I don't think this would have been able to ever become anything. Because we're in alignment with what our goals are and making sure that the sacrifices that we're taking to reach them, they're agreed upon already. That's the biggest thing. I also think it's okay to give yourself some grace. I'm not a workaholic. That's not my personality. I have crazy spurts of energy, and sometimes I won't work from 12 to 3. And then at 7 o'clock, I log in and I have all this energy to work from 7 to 11, which is why I also think entrepreneurship probably worked a little bit better for me because my working style, my motivation, it doesn't always align with those strict 9 to 5 hours.
What about carrying like the frustrations of things back and forth? Basically, something, let's say, from the because I know because I was an independent consultant. I worked for
Yeah.
smaller companies and partnered. I was actually running partnerships for the smaller companies and getting SAP partnerships and PeopleSoft
Yeah.
partnerships and Oracle partnerships, all those things, and also canceling partnerships to companies that piss me off one reason or another, right? And I never had an issue with that. But let's say the pursuit of those partnerships was because it was big companies who really thought that they were gods back in the day,
Yeah.
um, who wanted to lord it over you, and you wouldn't let them. But you get frustrated because either process was long or the time was short or their requirements were ridiculous, or they didn't really have a program that fit you right, but you still needed that partnership because you had a practice of 100 people who were doing that
Yeah.
thing, and it would carry over. You get frustrated, you get tired. You to your point, travel a hell of a lot, but you get tired. When you got home, you'd be tired. When you're off to travel, or you didn't want to go on a vacation because you were sick and tired. This is one that happened to me as an independent. At a certain point,
Yeah.
there were times I didn't want to go on vacation, although luckily my wife and I love cruising, so it was okay. But we didn't want to go on vacation because I just didn't want to get on a plane again. So, I mean,
Yeah.
how about things like that?
You're not wrong. And I'm very self aware. So I know I'm a complainer. I will complain. I'll do it. I'll get over it and I'll do it happily still. And I've had bad clients. I've had really difficult clients that I'd come home and I would just be in such a bad mood. Um, it was a learning curve to separate what I'm doing in my okay, when you have a job, it's easy to be pissed off at your boss and come home and you're like, "Oh, thank God I'm not around my boss anymore." But when it's your business and somebody's being difficult or critical of your process, it's a lot more personal. And it takes a little bit longer to learn to separate your business from you, and that took a little bit. I had to come home from difficult clients, then realize that it wasn't a personal attack on me, and it also wasn't done by my husband. And sometimes I just need to leave it at the office, and I can walk back in a bad mood, but I cannot walk back into my house in a bad mood. So
I,
that
you
was
know,
really big.
I get that. No, I get that. Actually, it's interesting. I didn't quite, I mean, I was a consultant for, let's see, since really for 24 years. I was independent from 2002 to this year, really. I mean, even though technically I'm retired. Um, but I never separated from my life exactly, but I did separate it from my wife, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean, right? I kept my frustrations. I mean, look, to be honest, they would spill over sometimes. It's just like
Yeah.
life is life. But at
Yeah.
the same time, for the most part, I understood she wasn't the cause of this. And
Yeah.
because my wife happens to be from Newfoundland and tough as nails as well as wonderful, um, she let me know just in case I didn't remember that.
Right. And my husband's also an entrepreneur, and he also has difficult clients, and sometimes he wants to give me unsolicited advice on my business, and I had to learn to just listen because it comes from a good place and he's further down the path than I am, and I can't really snap at him over him trying to be helpful just because I'm a little bit on edge that day. Um so that was really important. I also think that there were a lot of times where I didn't want to do something. Like my brother-in-law got married last year, and I was very busy last year. It wasn't always fun to smile and go to these 5-day events, but at the end of the day, showing up for your family is more important than showing up for your clients, showing up for your business partner, showing up for anybody else in your life. And experiencing that moment, whether you're tired or not, will always be enjoyable.
Mhm. So actually, to that point, so you also have on the business side, you have a business partner, and you're at home. She's, let's say, got something that needs to be done. She's got I don't know what her home life is like, but she has one, right, one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so what happens when, like, and this, I was always 100% independent. I did not have business partner. Brent's my best friend,
Yeah.
right? But he wasn't my business partner. I was 100% independent. We didn't have a, I mean, PPN is kind of a joint business, but it's not the norm for business. We're not trying to
Right.
be giant company profitable, right? That's not our
Right.
purpose. If it happens, it'll happen, but it's his company as far as I'm concerned. Um, so, uh, but I was always 100% independent, so I didn't have to pay attention to the requests or that from my business partner, and that might impinge on other things I'm doing at home.
Yeah.
So, what happens when that happens? How do you deal with that?
Well, I am also a firm believer that who you go into business with is as important as who you marry. Not to the same scale, because
No, a
ideally you're
different
not, but it's
way.
different. If we're sharing
Right.
a bank account,
Yeah.
I have a friend whose business partner stole $1 million from him while he was going through cancer treatments. Like,
Oh my
that
God.
is as big of a betrayal as a spouse committing financial infidelity.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful that my business partner is a great person. And we weren't necessarily friends first or foremost. She's about 20 years older than me. She's in a very different phase of life than I am. So where I'm getting married, she already has children. And making sure that you understand when you're asking something of someone, is this a time sensitive request that they need to do right now? They need to drop things for. If they can't, can I do this? Why am I delegating this to that person? I think is really important, especially because early on, unless you have a technical founder and a non-technical founder, you're both doing everything. The lines are not very clear unless
Right.
one person is strictly able to develop something and the other one cannot.
So
Um,
so let's say she comes to you and says, I'm doing X, the thing you're both doing this, what X is. She said,
yeah,
I'm in the middle of the X2 part of it, but I can't quite get this and I need your help. And on your way you're not on your way to something that you must attend, like a wedding or
yeah,
somebody else's wedding. Um, but you're on your way out to dinner with,
yeah.
what
And that
happened?
happens because she's 2 hours behind me. She's in Seattle and I'm in Houston. So that's happened before. I ask, is this something that you need me on the computer for? And is it something that we need to resolve tonight? And she's always very understanding. And it took a little bit of understanding each other's boundaries to figure out when it's an appropriate ask and when it's not, a little bit of trial and error. And if it's time sensitive and it doesn't require me actually getting on a computer, I call her on the way to dinner and we talk through it.
Oh,
And I'll
well,
step out. Yeah. And
right.
we figure it out. And if it is time sensitive, then it's like, okay, how time sensitive is it? Is it like in the next 10 minutes? Do we have to turn around? Or can it get done before midnight? And I just get on the computer when we get home from dinner after she's put in her best effort and I try to figure it out on my own.
Actually, that raises another question, which is time,
Yeah.
right? So far, I've heard you say sometimes you go off from 12 to 3, and then you get a burst of energy, you work from 7 to 11. And
Yeah.
then I've heard that you've heard say, get back from dinner. Most people are, they're morning people, they're evening people, they're, they're, they kind of manage or they schedule things that they're kind of a little more rigid about time. Like, look, I'm 76. I realized a while back, I used to sleep 5 hours a night and I was
Oh
fine
my
with it. And
gosh.
I was slept okay. I mean, I slept okay. I still was one of these people that had energy and so on and so forth. And then somebody said, well, why don't you get more sleep? I said, when I'm dead, I'll have loads of sleep. So I'm not going to worry about it right now. Right. So, but then I realized, whoa, wait, I'll be dead a lot sooner if I don't start getting sleep. Right. So I started managing my sleep and now I get 7 hours and so on. But, you know, and I've adjusted, for example, I used to be stay up late guy. I'd stay up till midnight typically.
Yeah.
And, and I get up at 7, or something like that. Now I go to bed about, it depends on the day or if I'm watching a game that's carrying out a little long. Uh, I go to bed at say 10:30 and I get up at 6. And it's just routine at this point, but it's routine. That's kind of the idea, as opposed to let's see when I'm energetic, right? How do you do that? I mean, do you actually manage your time, or do you just kind of handle it when the energy's there? You do something.
So I'm going to be very honest. I'm still learning time management. For example, I was at the gym and I thought this was at 11 my time and I had to leave and come here. So I'm clearly not the most effective at time management. I try to fit things in when I can. Because of the ad hoc nature of where I'm at in my business, when I tried to structure it from 9 to 5, I found that I wasn't as productive.
Right.
I wouldn't get responses. And then I'd have to get on after like just twiddling my thumb. And then I'd be like, oh, if I'm logging off at 6 sharp, I won't get to this until tomorrow because they messaged me at 6:30. So that just doesn't really work for me. I am hoping to get to a more structured schedule, but I think there has to be a more consistent demand for me to be working 9 to 5 before that happens. And yes, Bob, I do call Bob a lot for things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's a wonderful guy, man. He's also really accomplished at partners, right? At
He
partnership.
is.
So, all right. I know we're kind of out of time, but I don't know if people, they used to say, what's the one piece of advice you would give? I'm actually going to ask you for two. Give the two pieces of advice you would give people who are in your kind of situation. They're, let's say, um, not brand new entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs with a few years under their belt, but not 15 or 20 either, who came from that corporate world. How should they manage themselves?
I think the first thing I'm going to say is give yourself grace because it's never going to work out the way you think it is. I got lucky. I got my first client the first 2 days I launched, and I didn't get a client for 8 months after that. It was really difficult. So give yourself grace. Just because you're not killing it in the first 3 years doesn't mean you're not going to the next 3 years, and it doesn't mean it's the wrong path for you. But it is easy to get discouraged if you're like me. And then the second thing I will say is that um, I don't remember it. I had it in my head and I lost it.
That's
But
all right.
oh wait,
Sure.
I think it was going to be this is really hard. It's probably the hardest thing that you're ever going to do if you keep at it until it becomes something that turns into something real. You have to make sure that where you're going justifies the sacrifices that you're making on the way there. And I don't mean that as in, I'm going to sell this for $100 million and that'll be worth it, because $100 million may or may not be worth your family relationships. So figure out if the end goal is worth the sacrifices that you're going to make for the next 5 to 10 years to reach it.
Yeah, to your second point, I remember this one person I saw speak at it was Infusionsoft conference, and her speech was on, and Infusionsoft are all very small companies, very very small companies back when they were still around as Infusionsoft, and they had this. I don't remember her name, but she said something that might be the most appalling thing I've ever heard on a stage, which was, if you want to make $1 million and as an entrepreneur, and she literally put it this way, you have to give up your children. I mean, I don't think she meant get them adopted by someone else. I think she meant like you're not going to be spending any time with them. And if you're willing to make that sacrifice, you are a terrible person, right? So, I immediately made a point of thinking, well, this is someone I'm never doing business with ever, ever, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. But so, to your point, you know, be if you're smart about the sacrifices you're going to make, and you can contain them to the extent you can, it works, and it worked for me. It's working for you, and so we'll see how it goes. And Layla, thank you so much for this. This was exceptionally helpful, I think, to the
Thank you so
people
much for
who will be
having me.
hearing it. Well, no, you're a star, my dear. And I also, by the way, highly recommend you take a look at her company. So why don't you give people a little bit of detail how to reach you, and also the website? So
Yeah, don't judge me by my website. I'm too cheap to pay for a website developer right now, so I built it myself. But you can contact me through the website on www.getpartner.com, PRTNRD, or LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me because I'm very, very active there. That is just my name, Lela, Lela, Koopal Patel.
thank you so much. And I know I'll be seeing you soon. And
Yeah,
hopefully, so will all the people who ultimately see this. Thank you, Layla.
thank you.
Okay, so again, she's an extraordinary person. She really is. And again, I haven't even known her a year, I don't think. But um, not only is she doing something that I highly recommend you take a look at it, and it's not just, again, it's the tool and the consulting. Don't forget, it's both. That's really important. But also, um, stay tuned for where she's going to go. She's going to go somewhere with this. And she's given me hope for this market again, which I didn't have, to be honest, but I now have it because of what she's doing. All right. So we now are going to be moving over to Outside In, where I'm going to introduce you one of my oldest friends, Scott Rogers, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's go to, um, well, actually, let me say one other thing. So that Inside Out, as you know, is a segment where um, person in the B2B world talks about something that is not necessarily their business per se. Uh, Outside In is where somebody who is not in the B2B world is talking about something of interest to B2B executives. So, look, one way or the other, Brent and I have acknowledged that's our audience. Okay. So it's just the way it is. So um, it's really it's really, really important that you pay attention, B2B executive, to what this gentleman, and he's like me, a boomer, is going to say. But before we do that, let's go over to, of course, the Outside In studio, which once again, I make believe is a separate studio, but is not. So just hang in there. And when we're done with the intro, you will be seeing me and Scott Rogers. Hey, Scott, welcome.
Good morning, Paul.
How you doing, my friend? You
Good.
good?
How are you?
I'm good. So let me tell people about you. So years ago, and it's 2002, I guess, really, it's when I went out on my own. 2002. It's 2002, 2003, I would imagine. I think it was around that. Two. Yeah, it was two. Okay. I had a speaking tour, and it was the very first speaking tour I was ever doing. And I was with EYT, Ernst & Young Technology. It was a kind of a, I want to say it was a 6 or 8, stop tour. What was the name of that town in Pennsylvania we were at again? Malvern, Pennsylvania. So literally we stopped at this town I had never heard of in Pennsylvania to start the tour in Malvern. And there was this guy in the audience who was listening kind of intently, and I could tell he was like thinking. So, and he looked so friendly, right? So after the speech was over, we started talking, and here we are 24 years later, and we're still talking, right? So, we are just, he's like one of my favorite humans. He's one of my great friends, and he's a very accomplished person. Now, what makes Scott's journey a bit unusual is he's been a B2C executive, he's been a B2B executive, but he's also been part of a program over time, although I recently retired from it, but it's been part of a program over time with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which, of course, is emergency management and first responders from the government side. And his executive experience plays really, really into the program that he's working with or worked with at FEMA. And I wanted to talk about that today. But before we do, why don't you give people a little bit of your history, your work history a little bit, and also your personal history.
Yeah, it's I remember we talked at lunch that day in Malvern.
That's right.
And you were flabbergasted that CRM in bridal. One time I was with David's Bridal then, going a once in a lifetime purchase. It's like,
yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's how we first met. So I have been in B2C on the client side always. So I'm on the and being an end user of technology, and I have kind of started out on the finance side of things, very much the left brain side of things. I was trying to build sales forecasting models for new stores, predicting people's behavior. So as I tried to get better at predicting people's behavior, I got more into market research and then, trying to understand customers. And, with Paul's help, kind of moved over from left brain to right brain type thinking of the world. So got into, more into customer experience towards the end, but but always in that, on that vein of things. So and being an end user, and I was in got a job in 2015, 2016, where I could work from any. So anyway, we've been in we have my wife and I and one son, and we've lived in 8 different states.
Wow.
Because it's different retailers or different companies. And, so we moved, and she was fabulous about it. So so we've moved a lot. And, change, always at corporate. So change company, you change state too. And I was always usually a lot of those places, there was a department of one. So I'd have many hats that I was wearing anyway. But so it's kind of that kind of thing. And so 2016, I got a job. I could work from anywhere. 3 months later, we packed up and moved from Salt Lake City to Maine. And about 18 months later, the company I was with decided to shutter this division, new experiment they were doing. And so find myself out of a job again, downsized. And then so I'm up, we're in Maine, and my wife going, okay, so where are we moving next? Which, it's this is where I'd always wanted to live anyway. So
a beautiful state.
Kind of, yeah. And I'd always been, since I was 8 years old when I first came here, this is where I've always wanted to live. So, and now I'm finally here. And we're going, okay, where are we going now? And so I'm putting out the resumes everywhere and starting to, look everywhere. And I'm trying to add some more light if I can. Not enough through the one window. So then I was there was a job fair in this town that was going on. And when I went to the job fair, there was a table there, and it was FEMA. And they were looking for 120-day temp jobs. I'm going, okay. And it's, so I figured, well, 120 days is going to buy me, some time to keep looking, keep trying to find a job. Kind of hard when you're 66 and living in Maine. Mm-hmm. And given my background. So it's, I figured 120 days, great, buy some time. So I joined FEMA and got 3 weeks of training on their new. In fact, the year or so, it was less than a year before I joined, that they had started this new computer system, which was kind of a bit like a project management. It's a process management, but like a project management and a CRM system combined. So it was something easy for me to pick up. And it made a lot of sense to me. But this, so it was a 120-day job. 3 months into it, they asked, does anybody want to stay? And so I decided well, I'm still looking, so I raised my hand and got the interviews, got the security clearance, long process in there, and became a reservist. And starting back at FEMA, so FEMA has basically 3 divisions that go out into the field. So one is the rescue people, like Red Cross. They're there, boots on the ground.
Those are like the first responders?
The first
types.
Responders.
Yeah.
So they're there right at the beginning. And these are whatever disasters, whether it's, wildfires or hurricanes or tornadoes or floods, and you're responding to that. Then the next group in is and fairly soon after that is the individual assistant, the IA division, and they're the ones that help homeowners rebuild. So if your home's destroyed or damaged, they're the ones that come in and help you. They're the ones that get come in with the trailers, that temporary housing and things like that.
So they're infrastructure people.
Yeah, and so they're that's the next group in, and that's almost immediate afterwards. Last group in is public assistance, and those are the people that help the government, the local and state governments and some kinds of nonprofit tribal governments rebuild infrastructure. So roads or schools or whatever that were destroyed, help rebuild there.
So they're the so let me see if I got the sequence. The first group is basically coming in to deal with human injuries or potential human issues.
Right.
The second group is once the issues have been ascertained and the immediate critical things have been handled, the second group's coming in to handle the interim, what are we going to do till this place gets rebuilt stuff. And then the third group is going in to handle the actual work to start the rebuild.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's the third group is rebuilding the public infrastructure,
as you said,
rather than individual homeowners.
Okay.
Or so it's and actually the flood insurance thing is run out of FEMA too. So but
so how does the program you were part? I'm presuming you were effectively in some way part of the third group.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So how talk about your specific program though? It's because it's a really interesting program.
It was I was hired in as a PDMG, a program delivery manager.
Okay.
And basically what you were asked, what when I started interviewing, they were looking for people who would be the face of FEMA. You're the ones that the local town that you're dealing with, you are the one that they see. You're the one that explains things. You're the one that's going to gather all the information. You're the one that's interacting with the customer directly.
So are you physically going there?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're physically going there. When I joined, it had been a nor'easter that came through on Halloween in 2017. So and FEMA comes in, it's whenever a disaster hits, and this will, sometimes before a disaster hits, the the state will request FEMA to come in. And once that's approved by the federal government, then FEMA can come in. So, if you know a hurricane's coming, sometimes the state will request that it's, their FEMA come in. That's when the, first responders, the rescue people, can be there before it even hits. But the public assistance people are the last ones in, and usually the last ones out, because it's the things that take the longest to do. So you're the ones that, and they were looking for people that were good at interacting with customer facing, being the customer service face in there. And
you're also dealing with distraught people all the time.
Oh yeah, because it's, especially the IA people, that, they're in the midst of when it's, they're without a home, and the public assistance people are, that can be a couple of months before that comes along. And so it's before that group comes in, because you're not going to get there. You're not going to be there because you'll be in the way, and the towns haven't been able to assess what their needs are.
So are you already? So so you had first group, second group, and you're sort of the 2.5 group then, in effect. You kind of, are you going in?
You're the third group in. So
you are part of the third group.
Yeah. So
specifically.
So
are you going? So wait. So when the third group goes in, when the public infrastructure group goes in, but are you the people? Meaning you? Did you deal with the individuals who had no home?
No, because that's the IA division. They'll deal with the homeowners. I was only dealing with governments.
So the IA division is kind of a fourth group, really.
The IA, there's three. There's the rescue, and then there's 2 recovery divisions, IA and PA.
So
IA is individual assistance, and they're
public assistance.
They get there very quickly because
they're the second group.
You're without a home. Yeah, you're without a home.
Right. Okay. And so you're actually on the rebuilding the fundamental infrastructure.
Right.
Wow. So how does that? Okay. So talk about, if you're able to, give like a specific example of how that actually works, because technically I know, and this has come when you and I were just shooting the breeze a few times. You mentioned that there are insurance things that have to be handled and things like that, but you're dealing with the government. So who's making the claim? And I mean, how's that? So can you talk about like a specific time that you did and what you did in a little bit of detail? I think would be a great way to kind of close the show.
So so the town will usually, the mayor or the town council or whatever it was, they'll put one person, usually one person, 1 or 2 people in charge of being the point contact. So the mayor will sign, either the head of finance or the fire chief or the police chief or the head of the public works. Somebody's the point person that you're dealing with.
Okay.
And sometimes there's multiples. So, I mean, there's one town that it was the police chief and the Department of Public Works people and they were in two different buildings. But
Yeah.
you know, when FEMA comes in, so I'm working in they rent a local space, and they're trying to rent it. So if the state of Maine, for instance, had a nor'easter that came through and it went through the entire state, and so they originally had an office in Augusta because that was as central as, well, to the population, but not the geography. Maine is huge. But then there was a second storm that came through in March that they needed more public assistance people. Wow. And they opened a bigger office, or they opened an office in Brunswick where I live. And so that had 150 people in it.
Holy cow.
And we're dealing with two disasters, you know,
one on top of the other,
you know, and you're dealing with the entire state, but you're dealing with that four things just for that state and just for the towns in that state. And I would get like 8 or 10 towns that were mine.
Okay.
And you would go there, you'd go there, you'd call them up in the beginning, and you go through initial call of what this whole program is, and kind of what information FEMA needs, because what you're trying to do is to help them get the grant money to rebuild in there. And so you're explaining the process, and you're saying, okay, these are the things I need. Then you set up an initial meeting, and you go there and hopefully explain it in more detail, and hopefully somebody has started to gather some of that information to begin with. And the whole idea is you have to, from the FEMA standpoint, my job is to work myself out of a job. And because the whole idea is to try to get them their money as fast as possible in there. But you're also trying, and you're the face, so you're gathering all the information. The people in the local offices that are open for a specific disaster or in a specific state, they're two groups. You either send the information to the Central Resource Center, the CRC, and if say the road was not rebuilt yet, so you're gathering up all the information that you send it to a bunch of estimators. Say the school's not done, then you get the information to send to the estimators. If something is done, all the work has been completed, then you gather all that information and send it to basically an accounting division. But then it has to go through insurance. So FEMA's not going to pay for anything that insurance is going to cover.
Right.
And you need to send the insurance information, that the town's insurance policy, to FEMA, who has an insurance division, who will read it and say, this is what we expect that your insurance will pay for. And then you're also gathering all the information for the environmental people, because the environmental people would then go through and say, well, you needed to You couldn't fix that fence this way or whatever, so you had to make sure that they followed every environmental rule. And you're, as the face of FEMA, is trying. What you're trying to do is get all the information. My mission boss said, if it takes you a little bit longer to make sure you gather all the information, because my job is to make sure I gather all the information that the people down the line that are reading all of this and figuring out how much money FEMA is going to pay, that they have all the information that they have, so that they don't have any questions and it's not sent back.
So effectively, if you're taking all this in total, you're looking at making sure, if you're the beleaguered town, you're making sure that the face of FEMA, whoever that would be, like you there, is getting exactly what you ask for as quickly as possible in order to facilitate the speed of getting the funds you need. Is that correct? All right. Yes. So let me ask you one final question before we have to go. What would be aside from what I just said, right? What would be the one thing you would recommend to a beleaguered area who's undergone this kind of emergency? And that's, most of them won't, but there always will be. What's the one thing when dealing with FEMA that they need to do to make sure that they get what they need at the time they need it, aside from, getting you information fast? What would be the one thing? What or the one thing they shouldn't do? Either one thing they should do or the one thing they shouldn't do.
Well, it's one thing they should do. I mean, you're trying. The sooner FEMA gets all the information that you want, and hopefully you've got a program delivery manager that explains everything and understands everything that you want, because you want somebody at that end, the face of FEMA, the person that you're doing, to have second guessed every question that's going to come from the people down the line. So you want to trust them, and you want to get that to them as soon as you can. I always had and this is a separate thing. I always told the people that I was working with at FEMA that, the people at the town, they have a day job, and they will not lose their day job if they get their day job tasks done. They will not lose their job. They will lose their job if they don't do their day job. They will not lose their job if they delay getting stuff to FEMA when FEMA wants it.
Yeah, good point.
So on having people on the, mine was, because having come from the customer experience side and the other side, the private world, it's like, I got a day job.
Well, it's the power of what you're expressing there is power of empathy, really. I mean, you have to be empathetic to the fact these people have a life that's not involved with getting FEMA information. That's actually more important to their future than getting the information to FEMA. Right. So listen, Scott, we are out of time because Shashi's show is already starting. So no, thank you. Thank you so much. This was really important. Aside from being helpful, it was really important that people hear how these processes work. Because look, now, especially if you live in Florida, there's a pretty good chance something's going to hit you. If you live in Florida, your odds are like 100% higher than anywhere else in the country, or California maybe. But This was really helpful in terms of how the process works and what your role was and so on. So very much appreciate it. And of course, I love you. You know that.
And I love you too.
And I will hopefully see you, presuming I make it, to the happy hour this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Take care.
All right, so that's it for today and this month, and maybe 2 months as I rework show. What I highly recommend is you immediately go over to LinkedIn, find Shashi Bellamkonda's LinkedIn site or YouTube, the Players Production Network site, and watch Talking Headless, where he's got the Brohammer on today, John Reed, and Ashley Shabbat, who is the head of analyst relations at Miro. Other than that, I think we're done, and it's time to take you out.
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.